It is morally wrong to bring children into the world. Now, before you come for me, I'm not the one saying this. This is what David Benatar says in his book, Better Never to Have Been. David Benatar is a South African philosopher, academic, and author, and a modern day antinatalist. He argues that coming into existence is always a serious harm and concludes that it is morally better never to create new people. Now, I invested my time reading this book because I am somewhat of an antinatalist. And I do believe that we should not reproduce, especially when we ourselves do not understand our own existence. But today it's not about me. Today it's all about David Benatar's uh, theory about better never to have been. And today I will be talking about some of his core arguments in his book. Now, the first one is known as asymmetry argument. He argues that creating someone produces some pleasure and some suffering. Not creating someone produces no suffering, and no deprivation. Therefore, non-existence is always better. Not because existence has no good things, but because the good things never compensate for introducing unavoidable harms. Now, of course, this argument has its criticisms, such as if the absence of pain is good for a non-existent person, it is unclear why the absence of pleasure isn't equally bad. And Benatar gives a beautiful answer and a very nice example where he asks, if a couple knows with certainty that their child would suffer from an extremely painful disease, would you advise that couple to have a child? Would you? Now, most people would obviously say no. And then he asked, if a couple could create a child who would have an incredible life, do they have the moral obligation to create that life? Do they? Again, most people would say no, they do not have the moral obligation to. So he concludes by saying, then we have a duty not to create suffering, but we do not have a duty to create happiness. Yeah? Now, his second argument is people consistently misjudge the quality of their lives. Our brains systematically deceive us into believing that life is much better than it actually is. He asks, why do so many people say they're happy despite poverty, illness, heartbreaks, and every other suffering that human beings go through? And the answer is that human psychology evolved to keep us alive and not to tell us the truth. And he says that optimism is actually a survival mechanism. And he goes on to say that humans adapt to bad circumstances. At first, the bad circumstance feels devastating, be it a heartbreak, an illness, poverty, unemployment. At first, it feels devastating, but eventually, as human beings, we adapt and we move on as if that state is now normal. You understand? And I know this is common for most of us. Then he talks about we have something we do which is called downward comparison. Here he says that we do not objectively look at the quality of our lives, but we obviously always compare it to somebody who has it worse than us. For example, you will say, thank God I have food. I know there are people who are starving right now. You will say, thank God I have this job. Even if that job is not making you happy, there are people who are unemployed right now. Practically, he says we always compare ourselves to people who have it worse than us, not people who have it better than us. So then we comfort ourselves and say that our quality of lives are actually good. Then next thing he talks about is something called a Pollyanna effect. This where he says that we have the tendency to focus more on the positive than the negative. Again, this is how our brains have evolved to keep us alive, not necessarily to tell us the truth. And then he talks about how we forget negative experiences. Our brains, our memory, we tend to remember the good things and we brush over the bad things very fast. We focus on the good memories and how that time was beautiful, but we forget the negative experiences that we also experienced with that beautiful experience. again, showing that our brains have evolved to keep us alive, showing and not necessarily tell us the truth. Then he talks about pleasure is often belief. When I read this, I was like, God damn, this is so true. Because he explains and he says that you eat because you're hungry, right? You drink because you're thirsty. Uh, we have intercourse because we are feeling horny. Practically, he's saying that nature creates discomfort for us, then gives us a comfort relief. So practically, nature has created problems, and then it tries to solve those problems by giving us temporary pleasure. For example, after you eat, you feel very good until again you feel hungry, and then you want to eat again. So he says that pleasure is not actually pleasure, but it's just a relief from the discomforts that life throws at us. Now, his last argument is that one of the reasons why people want kids is to benefit the existing people. He says that people who want to have kids, it's never about the kid, it is always about them, what they want. And the kids cannot consent to what the existing person wants, but the person brings that kid regardless of whether they they put the kid into consideration. Now he said all the reasons that people want kids are all selfish, they're all for themselves. Reasons such as people want to experience unconditional love, they want to have a family, they want somebody to take care of them when they're old. Mm, some want to experience the pregnancy and childbirth. Uh, some want to continue their family genes, some family line or family name, sorry. Others want to pass on their genes. And then it talks about it's all about cultural expectations, religious beliefs, and all of these things. The child has no way of consenting to wanting to participate in all of these things. So practically every reason that you ever hear somebody wants to have a kid, it's never about the kid. It is always about them. So some of the arguments that I got from David Benatar's book, Better Never Have Been. The central argument of this book is that bringing a person into existence always exposes them to unavoidable harms, while not bringing them into existence deprives no one of anything. Therefore, creating new people is morally wrong, according to Benatar. I would love to hear your thoughts, guys, in the comments. Personally, I agree with everything that he said. In my next video, I will answer some questions that were asked in his book, such as if the quality of life is so bad, then why don't we kill ourselves, or why don't we ourselves, and why don't we all the adults and all the kids that are in existence right now? And then again, another question is, do antinatalists hate people? Have a lovely experience.